Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 936 Studying for the Test. Chapter 936 Studying for the Test. It had been a long time since he saw Yuna. So long ago, in fact, that he didn't even remember the exact date that they last spoke. He didn't even know when or why she left. He didn't get a letter or anything. One second she was there and the next she was gone. Sure, both of them had become busy these last few months. He had to establish the Reborn company in Metropolis and in New Sparta, which took up every single second of his time. Meanwhile, she had to keep up with the business of Montgomery as arbiters. But he would have thought that she would give him a notice at the very least. That's what friends do, he thought. I guess that's just it. She's the Yuna Kim. And I'm just. Yuna. Where are you, Yuna? Kaya. I want to see her in real life. I can't wait. In a few hours, she's going to be right here. Michael ignored all of the screaming and cheering from all around him. He slammed his ears with his palms, but try as he might, he couldn't help but let his thoughts wander and get distracted. Ugh! He shouted, disgruntled by all the noise. There seemed to be a rabid fever infecting everyone in its wake, making them mindless shrieking zombies. And the worst part was that they were doing this all voluntarily. He would never understand everyone's obsession with this new idol. He didn't know her, nor would he want to. All he wanted to do now was to focus on his studies and finally get to the university that he'd been dreaming about all of his life. After living in squalor, dressing in rags, and having nothing but a bleak and dreary future ahead of him, Michael was dead set on changing everything in his life. He didn't want to struggle for food every single day anymore. He wanted to be affluent and rich, so much so that he wouldn't even care about spending millions of dollars for something completely mundane. And this entrance test was going to be the only thing that stood in his way. It was the only obstacle to swimming in literal piles of gold. That image would have certainly entertained his father. As long as he got over that hurdle and passed the test, he'd be able to get a job in 4 years' time. A real job, one that paid real dollars, not some cheap change that those stringy bosses used to give him. He'd studied real hard, spending all of his time in the public library, reading and memorizing every kind of book he could get his hands on. He was so dedicated, in fact, that just hours from the test itself, he was still holed up in his corner of the library, cramming as much knowledge into his brain as possible. This would give him the advantage over everyone who chose to relax, he thought. But who would have expected this little maneuver of his to backfire? It was not only stressing him out, but also blurring all the information in his brain. It felt like the formulas and equations that he had written on the blackboard in his mind were suddenly getting erased by an ear-aching nail streaking across the board. Focus! He reminded himself. And in an attempt to retain all of the memory in his mind, he read through all the books he'd read before, as fast as he could. Fortunately, it worked. He still memorized everything he needed to memorize. Unfortunately, he lost track of time. The loud, overbearing gong coming from outside the library immediately reminded him of the current time. What? It's 6 o'clock already? His test was at 6:30. And the commute to the school lasted 30 minutes exactly. And with the way the tests were arduously constructed, with each problem needing a considerable time to calculate, losing even a minute of time could cause a person to lose a ton of points, thereby failing the exam. Damn it! He cursed. He didn't want to blame those avid fans, but he was definitely late because of them. He wouldn't have had to do extra studying if they weren't so noisy. But it didn't matter. He could still make it as long as he rushed out of the library and got on the next bus leading to the school. With literally no time to waste, he took his bag and ran out of the library, with his footsteps echoing through the hallways like an angry mob. He zigzagged his way through the crowd of slow walkers, flashing them a sorry look before running forwards in a rush. Eventually, he caught sight of the bus stop. And thankfully, the bus was still loading the commuters inside. But he didn't heave a sigh of relief yet. If he missed this bus, he would have to wait another 30 minutes before the next one came. And he didn't have the money for a private taxi. If he was late to the exam by 30 minutes, he would have to kiss his engineering future goodbye. So, he quickly picked up his pace and ran towards the bus as if his life was on the line. But in his haste, he wasn't able to see where he was headed, or who he would run into. He tripped on someone's leg and ran face first into the ground. Ow! He groaned, wiping the blood away from his nose. Indignant, Michael glared at the person who tripped him. But when he saw who it was, his anger subsided. Oh, sorry, young man. I didn't see you there. It was an old man, wearing ragged clothes full of grime and dirt. Around him were thousands of steaming peanuts scattered all around the floor, having been toppled down by his crash with a hasteful and inconsiderate student. Michael felt an ache in his heart as he saw this. His mind flashed with memories of his late father. Then he looked back at the bus, now just about ready to close its doors. And without a second thought, Michael turned back to the old man. Sorry. It was my fault. Let me help you up. Chapter 937 Different. Chapter 937 Different. Michael began picking up the peanuts from the ground and putting them back onto the old man's rattan-woven basket. Oh, you don't have to do that, young man. You look like you were in a hurry, said the old man, trying to push Michael towards the bus. But even as the bus released that signature TSSSHH signalizing its closing doors, Michael still continued on picking up peanuts without another care in the world. It's all right. It was my fault anyway, he said to the old man. He knew just how little people like them earned every single day. He knew the hardships of walking tens of miles just to cater steaming peanuts to people who ignored them 99% of the time. He knew the sacrifice they had to make, just like his father. So he couldn't just let the old man lose his entire livelihood just because of his mistake. It could be the difference between the old man putting food on the plate for his family or not. Most people disregarded this as an unfortunate accident. The students around them simply watched and did nothing, thinking that the spilled peanuts were not worth the effort. But Michael knew the importance of even a single peanut. Of course, it shouldn't be as important as an entrance exam to the most prestigious engineering school in the country. The only sensible thing for Michael to have done was to say sorry and leave the old man alone to catch his bus. But he just couldn't find it in his heart of hearts to leave the poor old man alone. It would have left a prick in his soul that would have never recovered. He'd be so guilty and distraught that he wouldn't have been able to focus on the test at all. It was anathema to him. He reached out to a single piece of peanut left on the ground, when his hand suddenly bumped into another. He looked up, seeing a hooded figure and on their knees beside him, picking up the peanuts off the floor. Michael couldn't see their face, with their eyes having been obscured by dark sunglasses and their mouth covered in a medical mask. However, there was something about them that seemed familiar. Not only that, but as they came close to him, he got a whiff of her scent. It was ambrosial, smelling sweet and refreshing. He'd never smelled a perfume so distinctly fragrant before. Here's the last batch, said the hooded figure, her voice feminine and gentle. She handed the wooden basket of peanuts back to him, never minding the fact that her hands had gotten dirted in the process. Oh, thank you, dear. You're a nice young lady, aren't you? Asked the old man. The hooded girl chuckled, but offered no response in return. Meanwhile, Michael had been staring at the hooded figure for quite some time now as he tried to understand what made her so familiar in his eyes. There was just something about her, some idiosyncratic characteristic that should have made her recognizable from the get-go. But he just couldn't get a clean look. Puliard, the girl asked him. This woke Michael from his stupor. Huh. Your shirt, she said, pointing to his high school letterman jacket. Do you go to that school? I am, he replied. Wow. I always thought men who went to Puliard only cared about their studies. They never seemed like the type to help an old man, she said casually. Michael chuckled. I'm different. Then, he noticed a mobile phone sticking out from her hoodie's pockets. His eyes flashed with shock. This phone was the latest version of the most popular phone in the world. And the most surprising part was that the phone wasn't even out to the general public yet. And I'm guessing you're from uptown, he said. The strangely dressed girl was clearly wearing something to obscure her true identity. But Michael could see a hint of expensiveness as he looked at her. Even though it didn't look like it, the brands of normal clothes that she was wearing were probably worth tens of thousands of dollars easily. This greatly surprised him. He always thought that those who lived on the upper side of the town were people who were superficial and only cared about flaunting their wealth. He visited that place once, and the people there always flashed him a judgmental look for wearing normal, second-hand clothes that didn't cost an arm and a leg to buy. And try as he might, he always judged people who were rich and affluent because of this. I didn't think high-class people like you bothered to dirty your hands, he said with a teasing tone. This could have easily offended anyone. However, this received a chuckle from her. Haha, I'm different, she replied. Michael laughed as well, with the two of them smiling at each other's wrongful prejudice. Ho ho ho, you two make quite a pair, the old man said, noticing the certain atmosphere growing between the two. Now, Michael may be a man who dedicated his entire life to studying, but he wasn't immune to the desires of youth. He too had romance and courtship burning through the back of his mind. And for some reason, he seemed to like this girl who he'd barely even met. In fact, the old man's words seemed to have sent his imagination running wild. Surprisingly, it seemed that he wasn't the only one. "Hey, are you free tomorrow night?" the girl asked meekly, the blushes on her cheek blooming out despite the mask. "Meet me at this place at the same time." Michael staggered. Her gentle voice would have sent anyone clutching their hearts in swoon. And he, too, felt his own chest viscerally reacting with excitement. But he didn't know what to say. He had never been in this type of situation before. Just as he was about to say something, he heard an excited screech from a few meters away from him. "Oh my God! That's Yuna!" Chapter 938 Girl in the Hood. Chapter 938 Girl in the Hood. A woman screamed at the top of her lungs, her face flushed with excitement and fervid animation. She was jumping on her toes, giddily pointing as she did so. Wait, not something, but someone. It was her, the hooded girl he was facing right at this very moment. She seemed just as startled as him as she quickly pulled on her hood to cover her face even more from the outside. But it was far too late. The woman's ardent and incandescent scream seemed to have become a signal or a beacon that awakened a virus within everyone's bodies like a sleeping agent. The keywords, Yuna and here, seemed to have created a veritable zombie apocalypse outside the library grounds. Even before Michael could fully grasp at what was happening, he suddenly felt the ground underneath his feet tremble profusely as hundreds of feet began stomping towards him. "Yuna, I'm your biggest fan. Please look at me. Yuna, sign my autograph and take a picture with me." In just a few seconds' time, he found himself getting swarmed by people of all ages and walks of life. They jostled, pushed, and rammed their way through as they tried to get as close to the hooded girl as fast as possible. Michael became the unfortunate victim of this stampede. He felt himself getting lost in the crowd, growing further and further away from where he was. He looked at the hooded girl and saw that she was looking back at him too. There was a sense of longing in her eyes, as if there was still something that she wanted to say. However, the tumultuous crowd kept pushing them further and further apart. It was at this moment that Michael's gaze with the hooded girl broke. They both turned to look to their side and saw the old man once again getting pushed around helplessly through the growing sea of rabid fans. The peanuts were crushed under their feet. The hooded girl opened her mouth to shout, but even her voice was getting drowned out by the crowds of people wanting to take a picture or an autograph with her. Then, she stopped, realizing that there was only one way to stop the crowd. Taking one last glance at Michael, who had already rushed to the old man's side, the hooded girl slowly turned around and led her zealous fandom away from the scene. Immediately, bodyguards surrounded her from all sides and led her away into safety. Soon, the raucous and cacophonous shouting and stomping softened as the group ran after the hooded girl. This left Michael and the old man alone to deal with their destructive wake. The fresh, steaming peanuts were now nothing more than a stepped-on mush on the ground. No peanut left uncrushed. There was no recovering them anymore. Michael sighed, knowing that there was nothing left he could do. "It's all right, young man. What's done is done." But this still didn't sit right. "What about your family?" The old man picked up the flattened basket from the ground. "They're gone. I'm the only one left. Selling peanuts has just been a way for me to pass the time. But you have a full life ahead of you." Then he approached Michael, giving him something in his palm. "Go. I know you were in a hurry for something." Michael looked at the pile of money and coins in his hand. Once again he felt a prick in his heart. Why was it always the people who didn't have much end up becoming the most generous of people? "Oh, and don't forget that," the old man said, pointing towards a certain keychain on the ground. This was a keychain from her phone. A white fox curled up in the snow. Michael picked it up from the ground, dusting it of dirty footprints. "Follow your heart," said the old man. "Don't make the same mistake that I did." Michael ruminated on the old man's words, and by the time he raised his head and got a hold of himself, the old man was gone. He was all alone. Then his gaze glanced at the crowd in the distance. Lingering, he could only mutter, "Yuna Kim." It was only now that the gravity of the situation truly dawned on him. He just met a global superstar. Michael never really did meet that old man again to thank him for the money. Even after he succeeded in life and earned enough money to live a comfortable life, he wasn't able to repay the favor. If it weren't for the old man, he wouldn't have gotten the money to pay for a taxi to go to the entrance exam. Thanks to that, he only ended up being late by almost 20 minutes, but thankfully, his endless nights of studying ended up paying off. He was able to ace the test and enter into his dream university. And the rest was history. As for his first encounter with Yuna Kim, that was one of his most memorable memories of his previous life. It basically started his admiration for her. He became her fan. But that was just it. He was just her fan. After all, he did go to the place. He stood at the center of the library grounds waiting for her to show up again. But she never did. He waited in the cold night, the winter breeze frosting his eyebrows, but he still persevered. And as it turned out, Yuna Kim had a surprise concert on the other side of the town during those times. Was he mad? No. Disappointed, maybe. But who was he to be angry? He wasn't even an ordinary man. He was on the bottom of the social totem pole. They lived a completely different life. Two extremes of the same scale. What was he supposed to do? Pursue her and demand an explanation as to why she didn't show herself. She didn't know him anything. They just had a small interaction that probably meant nothing to her. Something that she doesn't even remember. Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the ballroom at the conglomerate's table, a white fox mask turned to stare at the lonely lion-masked youth. Her gaze, lingering. Chapter 939 Ice Queen. Chapter 939 Ice Queen. Jadon looked at Michael right beside him, and quickly glanced at Yuna, immediately noticing her wistful gaze towards his enigmatic new friend. He looked back at Michael and saw that he was still in his reverie, seemingly not noticing the intentional stare that the infamous Ice Queen of the North was giving him. Then, Jadon looked back at Yuna just to see if he was seeing it right. And he was. Yuna Montgomery. The Yuna Montgomery was looking at this lion-masked youth with purpose, as if she was waiting for him to notice her and look at her. Wait. What is happening? Jadon said. Michael, finally out of his reminiscence, turned to look at him. What? Meanwhile, Neytiri, the dark-skinned girl from the main Hephaestus line, noticed Yuna's unusual actions. Hey, what's wrong with Yuna? She asked everyone. Gabriel and the others turned to Yuna, seeing that she was unusually animated this time of the night. She usually just kept to herself and read her books to pass the time, especially in gatherings like this. She always just did it out of obligation. But now, her book was actually closed. Not only that, but she also had her head up, as if actively wanting to participate in the gathering. This was very weird to them. Then, something even weirder happened. Yuna got up from her seat and started walking towards something, or someone. Yuna's footsteps were silent, almost non-existent in the natural noise of conversation and talk. But somehow, her presence attracted everyone's attention and silence. Why would someone from the conglomerate side go to their side? They all stared as Yuna reached the other end of the room, towards the last table containing only two people. Jadon stared dumbfounded as he saw the Yuna Montgomery standing right in front of him. So he was right. He was looking at Kyo. May I? She asked him. At first, Jadon didn't even know he was being spoken to. But the silence immediately made him aware of his sin. Yes, of course. Please take my seat. It would be an honor, Jadon said as he exited and offered his seat. Yuna then gracefully turned the chair directly facing Kyo, then took her seat. Hey, she greeted. It's been a long time. Now staring at these two people, everyone couldn't help but hold their breaths in shock. Were they seeing it correctly? Was the Yuna Montgomery really speaking to someone one-on-one? And it looked like they knew each other quite well, to the point where it even looked like they were intimate with each other. No one was perhaps more surprised than the five conglomerates. Are we seeing it correctly? Neytiri said, her hand on her mouth in shock and elation. It would seem so, Cedric says. When had we ever seen her so proactive? She actually walked to talk to someone. The conglomerate world was small, consisting of only people from the elites of the very elites. Everyone knows each other from the very start, having been sent to the same school together. After all, the offspring of those conglomerates couldn't be simply sent to a normal school. That wasn't elite enough. It had to be a school where all its students and faculties were on par with the skills and the premiumness that was befitting of the people on the top of the world. And in that school, everyone knew each other. They were all friends, or at the very least, acquaintances. But even during those early days, Yuna was already famous even amongst the conglomerate offsprings. After all, she was the only one there who wasn't actually from a conglomerate. She was from the Montgomery family, who occupied a very special place within the elites. They were the judges, arbiters, and the lawmakers. Many tried to become friends with her, but they always failed. She always responded coldly, acting churlish towards anyone who tried to talk to her. Unfriendly was a generous term. That's what earned her the nickname as the Ice Queen of the North. Anyone who dared to come close to her was frozen. It wouldn't be a few years later would they finally know why. Is that her special someone? Neytiri asked, realizing something. Yuna did mention someone like that to her some time ago. Special someone? I feel sorry for him, Gabriel said nonchalantly. Neytiri immediately glared at him, with Cedric elbowing his ribs. You know that's not her fault, Neytiri hissed. Sorry babe, but it's the truth, Gabriel shrugged. She's the treasured granddaughter of the Montgomerys after all. There's a reason why she's unapproachable. They all remembered the time when a prominent family tried to arrange a marriage with Yuna and their child. That day, all hell broke loose. That family was soon bullied out of their place in the conglomerate world, disbanded and dissolved into nothingness. In the span of a month, a powerful world-class entity was suddenly wiped off from the face of the earth. And the worst part was that they couldn't even rebuild their companies if they wanted to. Not only were they forbidden, but their main force was obliterated in an accident, leaving no heir nor successors behind. Of course, the official report said that this incident was caused by a natural disaster, but everyone knew that it was because of one single thing. They angered the Montgomerys. Or more specifically, they angered their matriarch. Everyone knew how she treasured Yuna, treating her like a star in the sky, too far out of humans' reach. This was what truly made Yuna untouchable. Because of that, everyone was far too afraid to get close to Yuna, much less court her. Only someone truly uncaring for their own lives would want to do so. After all, to Yuna's grandmother, no man was fitting for her. To say her standards were strict was an understatement. It felt like the only man who could truly live up to her expectations was someone out of this world. But that's just how she was. Zir Montgomery always expected more than the best. Chapter 940 Recognize. Chapter 940 Recognize. Michael perhaps was even more surprised than everyone in this soiree. He didn't expect Yuna to approach him. "Hey," she said. Michael was stunned, not knowing what to say. Felt like he was back in that library grounds. "Not even a hello?" she asked him. "Looks like you've changed a lot while I was gone." "Kyo." She playfully pushed his nameplate. He felt a tug at his heart. Something warm, something comfortable. It was only then that he realized that she really was talking to him. "Michael." Not Kyo. She knew who he was. "You know?" he asked, shocked. "Of course. I always remember someone who owes me an ice cream." Michael never thought she would recognize him. Not only was his face obscured by his mask, but his mana body composition was actually different this time. He made sure to make himself completely distinct and different from Michael to make sure that no one recognized him. And yet, she did. She shouldn't have recognized him. She wasn't meant to because she was Yuna and he was... How? Yuna stared at Michael and wondered how he even thought he could hide from her. She figured it out as soon as she arrived in the room. There was always an aura around him that was distinctly his. If she could describe it in one word, then it would be warmth. He was radiating a sense of comfort, as if he was the sun itself in a cold, dark winter's night. And no matter how he thought of himself, this aura radiated from him even if he tried to hide it. He would always be unique to her. Yuna then touched his hand on the table. "Of course I'll recognize you. I'm different," she said with a smile. Michael couldn't help but chuckle after hearing that. And somehow, just like that, all of the calcified emotions he was feeling were suddenly released. The warm touch of her hand melted it. The awkwardness of their separation after all this time was suddenly gone, and he felt like he could finally reunite with a dear friend that he thought he'd lost. "But I guess I'm not as different as you. You literally changed your name," she said. Michael looked at his nameplate. "Oh, this is just something that happened. Long story. But just don't tell anybody else about my real identity." Yuna stayed silent, and even though Michael couldn't see her face behind that fox mask, he could see a teasing smile forming behind it. "Oh, a secret, huh? Well, you better be nice to me if you want me to keep it," she said, her hands on her waist. What should I make you do? Should I have you follow me everywhere I go? Or maybe I should." Yuna was having too much fun teasing him. "Oh, a secret, huh? Well, you better be nice to me if you want me to keep it," she said, her hands on her waist. What should I make you do? Should I have you follow me everywhere I go? Or maybe I should." Yuna was having too much fun teasing him. "You're having too much fun teasing me for someone who left without notice," he said. She sighed, agreeing that it was her mistake. "Wasn't my plan. I was just going to return to my ancestral home to visit my parents since it's been such a long time. But things happened one after another, and by the time I knew it, I ended up staying for months on end." Michael nodded. He understood why she had to go, but not why she couldn't say goodbye. "Why didn't you leave a letter?" Yuna opened her mouth, about to say something. "You see, I returned there for more than just a visit. I had to finish my studies. And the Montgomery family has a special training method wherein we are completely cut off from the world. So I wasn't able to send a letter," she said. Michael was still a little bit disgruntled, but it didn't matter now. Yuna was here and that's all that mattered. Meanwhile, as the touching reunion from both reincarnators were happening, the entirety of the soiree ballroom was currently trying to figure out who this Kyo figure was supposed to be. No one here knew who he was, and that was a surprise in and of itself. Everyone here was from a prominent company or family, and they were all connected one way or another. At the very least, They'd heard each other's name. But not Kyo. Now, this wouldn't have been a point of interest for most people. But the fact that the Una Montgomery was speaking and acting all lovey-dovey with him, touching his hands, laughing and all of that made his identity something that everyone was interested in. Who was he, and how did he deserve the attention of Zir Montgomery's treasured granddaughter? Is he from an unknown territory in the Lower Queens region? Maybe a secret conglomerate offspring? I think that he's someone from one of the two major organizations. My bet is someone from the Order of the Heavenly Knights. But while they were in the middle of this conversation, a knock suddenly echoed throughout the whole ballroom. Everyone turned towards the stage in the further part of the room. It had been obscured by red curtains all this time, with most people thinking that it was just part of the decorations. But in the next second, the curtains suddenly rose up, revealing a single man on the stage. "Excuse me, youngins." The man was wearing primitive attire akin to hunters, and had the pelt of a wolf, complete with its head, wrapped around his shoulder. Judging from the Dao heart in his chest, Michael guessed that he was a werewolf. "I'm sorry for interrupting your lovely evening, ladies and gentlemen. But I have just come from the other side of the party with some great news." The other side of the party was where the adults were located. They had their own ballroom there, and consisted of leaders and owners of companies, werewolf tribe chiefs, royal blood vampires, merman leaders, and other such people. As you may all know, this soiree is intended for all of us to know each other for the lunar celebrations. And as the archery competition is about to commence, we are proud to announce that the leaders have all decided to add an incentive to the winner. Chapter 941 Conglomerate Announcement. Chapter 941 Conglomerate Announcement. Michael was surprised. This was the first time he'd ever heard that the first competition was going to be an archery competition. "Archery?" he asked out loud. And a few meters away from him, he heard a conspicuous cough. "Ahem," Jadan said in a whispered tone. "The Purveyor Werewolf Tribe has been chosen to be the first to showcase their competition. And they have issued a competition of the bows." Pleasantly surprised, Michael nodded to himself. As it turned out, Chief Lupin had nothing to worry about. The brown-blood werewolf chief had been blowing up his phone recently, talking about his worries for the competition. But, with Shiina with them, the competition was all but settled. "Archery, huh? How is Shiina?" Yuna asked. "You know how she is. Overbearing, fiercely loyal, and intimidatingly capable." Yuna laughed at his description. "Hee hee. Then that means that I already know you'll win the archery competition. Congrats." "What? Oops." Jadan forcefully closed his mouth, having been surprised after eavesdropping in their conversation. He tried not to, but he was far too curious about what the two were talking about. "Excuse me, but did you say that my new friend here will win the archery competition? As far as I know, the Pureview tribe has shown themselves as having skills rivaling even that of the elves. How can you be so sure that Kyo will win? It hasn't even happened yet." Jatan's curiosity for his friend burned through his eyes. Yuna turned towards him. "Well, Kyo here has a tendency of winning things over." Then, with a whisper under her breath, Yuna spoke softly. "I know about it especially," she said, holding her chest. "What was that?" Michael asked. Yuna flashed him an exasperated look, a mixture of amusement and irritation. Then, she playfully pushed his cheek away. Jadan, watching this, realized that the relationship between the two must have been much closer than he initially thought. This made him even more fervently curious as to the nature of their closeness. And more, who was Kyo? He wasn't the only one. The 5 conglomerates on the front tables all couldn't help but look at Yuna as if she was a completely different person. Felt like she was. This was a facet of her personality that they had never seen before. They didn't even think the infamous Ice Queen of the North was capable of such emotions. It was a truly strange sight. With the lunar celebrations commencing, it is only natural that we discuss in length about its details, said the werewolf presenter. Then, he turned to look at the 5 conglomerate youths right in front of him. "Gabriel, would you like to tell everyone the good news?" The blonde-haired, debonair genius of the Vanderbilt family walked up to the podium with a confident stride. The 4 other conglomerates around him were unsurprised, as if they knew this would happen from the start. "What's happening?" he asked. But it seemed that even Jadan didn't know. Thankfully, Yuna knew exactly what was happening. "The conglomerates are finally acknowledging the importance of New Sparta," she said. Jadan remained with a deadpan look on his golden retriever face mask. "Huh." But before Yuna could explain, Gabriel finally reached the stage and faced the crowd of expectant people in the ballroom. Then Gabriel removed his mask. Instantly, the girls swooned, and even the men started to feel a little bit intimidated. Gabriel was a good-looking man, with a sharp jaw, free-flowing and slightly curly blonde hair, and a smile that seemed to make him look like a Greek god. "There's no need for that anymore," Gabriel said, chuckling. "Let me introduce myself to everyone. I am Gabriel Vanderbilt, and I was sent here by my grandfather to oversee what was happening in New Sparta. Everyone aside from the conglomerates turned to look at each other, confused. They mumbled their guesses, but was soon silenced as Gabriel continued to speak. The 5 conglomerates have decided, he said, pausing, that the results of what happens in New Sparta will directly correlate to the promotion. As soon as that word was said, promotion, the whole ballroom suddenly turned silent. It drew a deep and ruminating breath upon everyone who heard it. Michael could feel everyone looking up at Gabriel with desire in their gazes. They wanted that promotion. Promotion? No way, Jadon gasped. Really? There's no freaking way. Yuna nodded. It's real. Michael was the only one who was left clueless. Promotion? What's that? Jadon then looked at him as if he was a kid asking what an alphabet was. It was the most basic thing that he should have known from the very start. Promotion. Do you not know about the Golden 500? Now that was a term he hadn't heard in a long while. In truth, after establishing himself in Metropolis, he didn't care that much anymore about the Golden 500 ranking. There was no difference to him if he was ranked 400 or 200. It was all the same to him as long as he could sell what he wanted to sell. What about it? Well, the Golden 500 is very important in the upper echelons of society. It's what decides whether you are able to advance to the rest of the country or not. Michael didn't understand. What did the Golden 500 ranking have to do with expanding territory? Yuna then explained. Ranking in the top 5 will grant a company the privilege to be called a global conglomerate. Now, the problem now is how to get that ranking. The best and most sensible way to climb up is through the slow and eventual expansion of a company. This takes decades. For most, this isn't enough. That's why there's a second way to get the ranking. And that is to challenge someone of a higher rank. If you defeat them, you'll take their place in the rankings. But it's not that simple, Jadon interjected. To even challenge someone of a higher rank, you'll also have to be a high ranker yourself. To put it bluntly, no one in New Sparta can challenge those upper echelons as of yet. Chapter 942 Promotion. Chapter 942 Promotion. Michael was surprised to hear that. Right now, the current highest ranking company in New Sparta has to be Alaric Goldstone. The last time he heard it, they were ranked inside the top 200. For reference, Michael remembered the Reborn company's ranking to be in the 300s. And even though their company had advanced and expanded their influence far more than when they first received that ranking, it still hadn't changed all this time. He hadn't wondered why because he didn't care all that much. But now he knew. According to what he heard from Yuna and Jadon, simply advancing one's commercial influence wasn't enough to actually climb up the rankings. They theoretically could, but that would take years, decades even, they said. The reason why the Reborn company hadn't moved at all beyond the 300th spot these past few months was because he hadn't actually challenged anyone for their rankings. This would have been the fastest way to advance. He just didn't know it. And in retrospect, it made sense. After all, it had only been less than 3 years since the Reborn company was actually first established. In the rankings' eyes, his company was still at its infancy. He had the potential but none of the teeth required for the higher rankings. This made him have another perspective onto the actual scale of the conglomerates and the upper echelon. If the top 200 wasn't considered to be a part of them, then what was? Wait. If Alaric's company can't challenge the upper echelon because his ranking is too low, then how can he advance? Jadon excitedly pointed at Gabriel. That's what he was talking about. Promotion. This is another way for a company to enter the upper echelons. Oh my god. This will actually change the game. But it will make New Sparta a lot more competitive at the same time. As Jadon began to go off on his talkative tangents, Yuna turned to Michael and explained. A promotion is basically a ticket that allows a company to reach the upper echelons. Not metaphorically, but physically. They'll be allowed to enter into the Upper Queens region, where all the conglomerates and other world-class companies have established their main residences. In short, this was a place where the 1% elites lived their whole lives. The quality of life there was heads and shoulders above even the elites of New Sparta. High society wasn't unique there. It was standard. If a smaller company were to enter into that place, they would be able to flourish on their very bountiful meadows. Even the crap there would seem like gold to them. It would be like a shark born in the wild, suddenly finding himself in a bountiful pond filled with easy meals. Of course, it wasn't that easy. Those goldfishes were probably a lot stronger than the shark, but the analogy still stood just based on the opportunities found on the pond. Even Michael found himself getting excited at the thought. If he had the opportunity to finally advance to the Upper Queens region, he would be one step closer to his dream. And that was to establish comfort in the world. So the promotion allows a company to enter the top 100 ranking? Yuna shook her head. Not exactly. They'll just be given special permission to operate in the upper echelons, but they won't be given the ranking. That's based on whether they can obtain it on their own. If they can't retain their position in the upper echelons after that opportunity, then they're not meant to be there in the first place. This promotion could either be a gift or a curse. If a company had the ability to actually contend with the upper echelons, then this promotion was a literal ticket that fast-forwarded them into the spotlight. But if they weren't ready, then it would only push them further down. It was basically a litmus test for companies for whether they had it or not. It being the X factor that allowed a company to transcend the normal. Sir Gabriel, is that true? If we perform well, will we gain a promotion, sanctioned by the Vanderbilt family themselves? And before he could answer, Cedric answered for him. Yes, that promotion will be sanctioned by all conglomerates, he clarified. This sent the whole ballroom into another excited murmur. Somehow, this big deal became an even bigger deal. Having all 5 conglomerates sanctioning a promotion meant that their ascension to the upper echelons was practically all but confirmed. Promotions worked by having one upper echelon company putting forth a proposition that the other upper echelons must agree to. For example, if a conglomerate voted for Alaric's company to have a promotion, that meant that all 100 companies in the top 100 ranking had to vote if they agreed or not. The votes must be more than half. It sounded easy, getting 50% of the votes, but it wasn't always guaranteed. According to what Michael heard from murmurs all around him, it seemed like only 2 companies had ever been given a successful promotion in the last 10 years. And that was out of 20. But, if this promotion was sanctioned by all 5 conglomerates, then practically every company would be obliged to vote yes. After all, it was never a good idea to go against the 5 entities at the top of the world. Yes, you all heard it correctly. The conglomerates have issued their interest in New Sparta. They are willing to invest in it. But of course, to ensure that this promotion will be given to those who are deserving, our families and companies have decided to send us to check. This sent a confused look on everyone's faces. Sir Gabriel, do you mean? Gabriel nodded, his dashing hair flowing. Yes, we will be participating in the competitions of New Sparta. This sent a lot of mixed reactions within the crowd. How could they possibly win against someone from the conglomerates themselves? Chapter 943 Mask. Chapter 943 Mask. The conglomerates were not only a lot more talented, but they had a lot more resources to build from compared to even the fortunate ones here in the Lower Queens region. Sure, the conglomerates probably weren't going to send the most talented geniuses of their company, but even the normal employees among them could be considered as paragons here in New Sparta. Because of that, many were immediately dismayed, thinking that they were not going to have any chance of competing for the promotion after all. But there were others who thought differently. People like Alaric, Aerith, Bobby, and all the other elites of this generation were more excited rather than worried. After all, this was the only chance they were going to get to practice against someone of that level. This would be a good gauge to test how they were compared to the conglomerates, allowing them to know how much more they needed to improve if they wanted to compete at that level. Not only that, but this was a chance for them to sharpen their swords. Alaric specifically was considered to be at the very top of the geniuses here in New Sparta. Although a prestigious title, this meant that he had completely outgrown this place. He found that because there wasn't that much competition around him, he wasn't able to improve at a pace that he was comfortable with. If he stayed stagnant, he estimated that it would take him a century before he was able to compete against the conglomerates. But with new competition, new blood challenging him for the top spot, he'd be galvanized to finally improve. Just then, his thoughts flashed back to a certain golden-haired kid. Michael. He was the only one who could properly challenge him. The memory of his nascent armor being stopped by someone at the 4th stage of body formation was still fresh in his mind. And somehow, that kid was able to transcend the stages of cultivation and show a strength that rivaled his. He went beyond even his own age, his face and body transforming into someone more mature and adult-like. Just the thought of that moment made Alaric's heart beat with excitement. He could feel his mind aching for improvement. Michael would have been a perfect partner for practice. A whetstone to sharpen his power. However, Michael was far too young. It had been a few months since that eventful auction, so Alaric guessed that Michael had probably advanced to the 5th stage. But knowing his penchant for surpassing people's expectations, Alaric guessed that Michael probably reached the 6th stage. Still, it would take Michael a decade until he reached the nascent spirit realm if he wanted to truly build a good foundation for his diva. So, he wasn't a good opponent for Alaric yet. Gabriel, on the other hand, was someone that would become the perfect stepping stone. The man was at the peak of the 9th stage, just a half step away from the nascent spirit realm. But Alaric knew. Their effective strength was actually in the nascent spirit realm. These geniuses from the conglomerates always had something up their sleeves. Something that gave them an extreme advantage despite their lower cultivation. If he were to rank everyone in the room, the 5 conglomerates stood at the top, while he was just right below them. The only one here who he wasn't sure about was this enigmatic figure called Kyo. The first competition that we will be joining is the archery competition set by the Purveyor tribe. Of course, to make it fair, Me and the other 4 before you won't participate in the competitions that are below our levels. Our companies will be sending representatives to participate on our behalf, Gabriel continued. The competitions in New Sparta were always divided into different groups. For example, this archery bout was separated into 2, the lower and the higher division. The lower division consisted of magnetics who were in the 1st to 5th stage of the body formation cultivation. Usually, this was where companies pitted their younger generations against each other. The higher division, on the other hand, consisted of 6th to 9th stage magnetics. This was to showcase the current and future potential of a company. Championships for both divisions were very sought after. That will be all, Gabriel said, bowing to everyone in the ballroom. I wish you all good luck. We await your ascension to the upper echelon. Once he was done with his speech, Gabriel went back down the steps and rejoined the other conglomerate youths. The werewolf presenter, on the other hand, instructed everyone to have a pleasant evening before walking back to the dark wall behind him. Then, the curtains descended down from the ceiling as he left. Of course, the rest of the soiree was no mere pleasant evening. It was very eventful, to say the least. Gabriel's announcement was a catalyst for everyone in the ballroom to start networking with each other. There were all sorts of alliances being made at the same time in the hopes that they could empower themselves before the eventual archery competition commenced. They didn't have much time though. After all, tomorrow was the official start of the competition. The only thing that they could do today was to make some trades about equipment, armors, and weapons. Michael had no need for any of those, so he just kept to his seat, entertaining Yuna. She was quite tender today. The entire time that Michael was engrossed in the announcements, he would see Yuna staring at him from the corner of his eyes. She had her elbow on the table, her hand supporting her tilted head. Then, she would just look at him. Michael wasn't used to this at all, making him feel awkward. Is there something wrong with my face? He asked her. She shook her head, chuckling as she did so. Yep, you're wearing a mask, dummy. Oh, she sighed, keeping her gaze staring right at his eyes beyond the mask. Then, she laid her head on her arm on the table. I wish I could see your face right now. Chapter 944 Straight Through the Heart. Chapter 944 Straight Through the Heart. When did the archery competition start? Tomorrow, right? Then why did Michael suddenly feel an arrow piercing through his heart? Somehow, Yuna's words sent him into a complete spiral that made his brain into extreme overdrive. Take into account, his brain had been bifurcated 500 times to accommodate for all the mini-drones that he created. But now that they were used up to buy the items he had in his emporium, those 500 divisions in his mind were now unoccupied. This meant that his brain now worked 500 times faster and more efficiently than a normal human. This was an unexpected outcome for buying his mini-drones. And he thought that this little ability would have come in handy whenever he was faced with a problem that needed a lot of brain processing power. But he would have never expected that his brain would get put to the test at this moment. He just couldn't understand what was happening with Yuna. She was very affable and amiable every time that he met her, but somehow, she was different today. She seemed to be glowing with a shine that was directed exactly towards him like a spotlight. And to be honest, it was quite blinding. He might even dare say she even looked affectionate towards him. But perhaps that was just the way she goes whenever she reunited with a friend. He didn't know. Global superstars lived a completely different life from normal people, after all. So? Yuna asked. So, aren't you going to ask me something? Michael was confused. Was there something he was supposed to say? Even though he had nothing to ask her. The gentle and the bewitched, how have you been? Uffed, Yuna snorted, not expecting that kind of response. But even though most people would see that as unbecoming of a lady, especially one of Yuna's esteemed presence within the upper echelon, Michael thought that she actually looked really cute. Not that silly. It's about the archery competition, she said after composing herself. What about it? And then, Yuna suddenly straightened her posture and crossed her arms on her chest. And even though Michael couldn't see her face, he could tell that she was doing her best to do a pouty face. Humph, she said, exhaling with a lot of disappointment. Then, she turned facing away from Michael, clearly no longer wanting to talk to him until he realized what he did wrong. Why? Michael was in a complete state of confusion. He didn't even know what he did wrong. He had a lot of powers, some even defying reality itself. But he didn't have a mind-reading psychic ability. How would he know what she wanted from him? Was this what other people meant when they said that women were hard to understand? They were creatures of mystery, hot and affectionate in 1 second, and suddenly cold and indifferent the next. Ahem. Michael turned around, seeing Jadon once again conspicuously coughing to get his attention. Biter, Jadon whispered. Huh? Michael asked, completely unable to understand what he said. Jadon exasperatedly shook his head before walking over to Michael to directly whisper to his ear. I think what Miss Yuna was trying to say is that she's waiting for you to ask her to become your arbiter. Michael's eyes widened, finally understanding why Yuna was so mad. She wanted him to ask for her help for the Reborn company. After all, there was a reason why Montgomery's held a special place in the upper echelons of the world. Even though they weren't companies and had no commercial value at all, they still stood at the same places that the conglomerates stood. Some would even say that they were even more important than the conglomerates. After all, they were the only people in the world who could enforce the rules and propriety that everyone had to follow. Montgomery's had a special ability called arbitration. They had the power to create a sanctum. These were completely different spaces in reality that were very similar to pocket dimensions. Except, a sanctum was something that could be completely changed to whatever one so desired. The physical rules of a sanctum could be changed at will, making it perfect for a sanctum duel. When two parties agreed to a duel, they would both decide upon its parameters. This included the reward in which they were playing for, as well as the neutral territory in which they would duel. That was what a sanctum was for. It allowed for the arbiter to create a completely neutral environment for both parties so that there would be no hijinks or anomalies that would give one or the other an unfair advantage. Montgomery arbiters are extremely sought after, Jadon whispered. A good one is impossible to find. Even the upper echelons struggle to get a good arbiter to their side. But perhaps the one most needed was none other than Miss Yuna herself. She was mentored by the venerable Zir Montgomery herself. In fact, that was one of the reasons why many wanted to be friends with Yuna. Her arbitration could mean the difference between a win or a loss. However, of course, since she was Zir's prodigy, no one dared to come near her. No one was worthy enough. That was why Yuna seemed disappointed in Michael. She wanted to be the Reborn company's official arbiter. Yet he didn't even ask. He didn't even look like he had any intention of doing so. Even conglomerates would grovel at her feet to ask her to become their arbiter. Here she was, offering her services to him, yet he didn't even seem interested at all. Michael, after finally realizing his mistake, turned to face Yuna. Sorry. I forgot about that, he said. Yuna, can you please become my arbiter? Humph, she breathed, turning even further away from him. You'll have to do something for me if you now want me to become your arbiter. Chapter 945 Experience Gained Since. Chapter 945 Experience Gained Since. Is there anything I can do? He asked her earnestly. Yuna looked at him, still undecided if she was going to go easy on him or not. Eventually, she turned to look at him with a look of victory and elation. I know. You'll give me an all-you-can-do ticket. A what? If you give me that coupon, then you can't say no to me for a single day. If I want you to say that I'm beautiful, then you'll have to say that no matter what. Michael tilted his head. But, you don't need that ticket for me to say that you're beautiful. You already are. Yuna froze. Michael's unexpected compliment left her completely speechless. She felt her cheeks blushing, her heart rate spiking to abnormal levels. She'd heard literally millions of compliments back in her previous life, and probably a million more in this one. And she never really felt that good when she received it. However, Michael's simple words felt like an arrow sneakily shooting through her chest. Wah, whatever. Then, she crossed her arms on her chest, her head turned away from Michael and trying her best not to make eye contact with him. You're not getting away that easily. You can't sweet-talk your way out of this one, mister. Michael raised his hands in defeat. Okay, he chuckled. Somehow he didn't feel all that bad with this. Just then, they heard the sound of silence suddenly overcome the entire ballroom. Then footfalls. Michael turned around and saw the 5 conglomerates approaching them from the side. Yuna, care to introduce us to your friend? Neytiri said, immediately approaching Yuna and hugging her from the back. Oh right, Kyo. These are my friends from back when we were in school. Yuna introduced. Immediately, a blonde-haired urbane and handsome man approached Michael, giving out his hand for a shake. Gabriel Vanderbilt. Pleasure to meet you, he said. Michael returned his greeting with a courtly shake, matching his solid grasp. He could tell that Gabriel was curious about him. He could feel the prodding in his ability power, like a gentle push to see how strong his foundation was. Inspection magic detected. Automatic rejection in place. Gabriel's scan ended up as useless as cold water on a winter's night. He sensed nothing around Kyo's body. Literally. In his eyes, Kyo was nothing more than a normal human, with a normal beating heart. But he knew that was not true. He could feel ability power from Kyo, no matter how slight it was. The fact that Kyo could hide his own cultivation from him, a peak 9th-stage body formation cultivator, meant that Kyo must be of a similar strength or even greater. This earned a look of shock from the handsome Gabriel, not expecting such a strong reaction. Of course, Michael reciprocated the action. He'd long used his drone to peer through Gabriel's actual cultivation and powers. Gabriel Vanderbilt. Realm? Peak 9th stage. Ability power, inexorable light. He wields the power to bend his own incandescent light. His brilliance is malleable, allowing him to create any object of his desires out of pure light. Protection. UNC, feline brightness armor set. Gabriel put his hands together in penance. You'll have to forgive me for snooping on you. I just got really curious, you see, about the man willing to. Neytiri immediately threw her shoe at her man, making him keel over and fall into the ground. I'm sorry for him, Neytiri said, before giving another glare at Gabriel. That was a stare implying that there would be no second warning. Michael waved off her concerns, while taking this chance to see through Neytiri's powers. Neytiri, realm, 9th stage body formation, ability power, desert construction. She is able to create monolithic desert structures out of anything she touches. Protection, hieroglyphic obelisk armor set. While he was busy inspecting Neytiri's power, 3 more figures appeared before him, each one prompting a window to appear containing all their essential information. Alexis Oscorp, E. Vera, E. Cedric Goldstone, E. The first 3 were the same as Neytiri, having the same base 9th stage body formation cultivation. Only Cedric was in the peak 9th stage. The fact that there was a distinction between them probably meant that there was an actual difference between those only in the 9th stage, and those already just a half step away from the nascent spirit realm. Now that I think about it, it's been a long time since I've increased my cultivation. The last time he tried it, the Godforge pieces refused to enter his chest. For the first time, this enigmatic and divine-like metal had repelled away from him. But he expected it. He'd been warned that advancing too fast was never ideal. It had only been a few months since he advanced to the 7th stage after all. Now for most people, those few months were entirely too short. They'd need half a year at least before they're going to think about advancing. But Michael was different. He'd experienced far too much for an ordinary cultivator. He faced off against tens of magnetics all at the same time, and killed them all. They had artifices instead of Godforge pieces, but their effective strength didn't differ that much from the real thing. He also had a brief, but very dangerous encounter against a nascent spirit piece. For God's sake. Not only that, but that piece belonged to the Grandmaster, someone that Katarina even feared. In short, he definitely had enough experience to finally advance to the next stage, and hopefully the next one after that. Now he just needed the Godforge pieces. Fortunately, he'll definitely be able to get the money to buy them. The elves and the dwarves were begging him to take on more phone orders. He wanted to, but the fact that he hadn't even delivered a fraction of what he was supposed to deliver made him hesitate. Unfortunately, he didn't know where he was going to buy the Godforge pieces. Well, at least that's what his new friend was for. Chapter 946, Jadon Thunderfoot. Chapter 946, Jadon Thunderfoot. Michael leaned in to Jadon and asked him a question. Pest. HNG. Jadon popped up from the crowd like a dog. His golden retriever mask almost made him look exactly like the real thing. Is there anywhere I can purchase Godforge pieces? Nodding, Jadon answered. Yes. Now usually, Godforge pieces couldn't be purchased wholesale like some kind of commodity. It's only purchased from one company to another, exchanging $1 for Godforge pieces whenever they need one or the other. However, you are in luck. There has been an explosion of Godforge sales quite recently. It seems that more people need Sudrops these days. I mean, who would blade them? Upgrading your armor or weapon was a limitless ordeal. You can arm yourselves to the bone if you wanted to. Godforge pieces, although giving you the possibility to increase your cultivation, can only be used very infrequently. Like once a year kind of deal. Now normally this wouldn't be a problem. Hoarding Godforge pieces could never become a wrong choice. But right now, competition was tense in New Sparta. They needed all the strength they could muster in the shortest amount of time possible. Of course, if they just recently upgraded their cultivation, then they had no use for their Godforge pieces. It was much better for them to sell theirs for Sudrops, which would give them an incremental but noticeable boost. There is one company in New Sparta who is selling as many Godforge pieces as they could in exchange for $100 or Sudrops, Jadon revealed. And they're an up-and-coming company, I dare say, one that could one day reach the upper echelon themselves. There was a proud look on Jadon's face right now. Not only that, but his golden retriever mask was frozen in time, looking like he was eternally asking for some recognition or some dog treats. It wasn't hard to guess why. Are you part of that company? Yes, Jadon grandly answered, taking everyone's attention. Then, he took this opportunity to look at the 5 conglomerates near his table. It is an honor to meet every single one of you. I hope that we can get along. I am Jadon Thunderfoot, from the Thunderfoot Company, hailing all the way from Bonacore Town. And surprisingly enough, this gathered some shocked reactions from some of the crowd. Thunderfoot? He's from that company. We just bought a few kilos of Godforge pieces from them a few days ago. They're chock full with orders. I heard about them too. They're selling Godforge pieces at a commensurate rate. I think they're planning on selling all they have on hand. After hearing this, Michael was surprised. Even in the special circumstances of New Sparta, most, if not all, companies would only sell off the very least of their Godforge pieces. The ones that they absolutely don't need anymore. At most, that would be 10 to 20 kilograms. Any more than that, and they're basically wasting their potential. They'd still need Godforge pieces no matter what. Yes, you heard that right, folks. If you have any need for Godforge pieces, you can simply come to us. No matter if it's 10 kilograms or 100 kilograms. We're available all week. Most people would treat the 100 kilograms as hyperbole. But judging from the numerous stories around the ballroom depicting many people buying Godforge pieces, all combining to reach 50 kilograms already, it didn't seem all that far-fetched. The fact that he had so much to sell meant that they probably had even more in stock, so much more in excess than what they needed. This earned him the slight shock reaction from the conglomerates, which Jadon relished. He furtively looked to his side, wanting to see if Aerith was looking at him interacting with all of these big shots. Well, my dog-looking friend, if we are ever in need of Godforge pieces, then we shall seek your help, Gabriel said to Jadon. Meanwhile, as all of this was happening, Neytiri pulled Yuna to the side and the two started a whispered conversation. Hey Yuna, who is that guy? Is he the special person you talked about? Neytiri said in a teasing tone, almost tickling her to the side. Yuna immediately looked towards Michael, who, fortunately, was still busy talking with the others to notice their conversation. Don't talk so loud. She hushed. So? Is he? With another furtive glance at Michael, Yuna nodded. Kai-ah. With Neytiri's teasing, Yuna lowered her head in embarrassment. But wait, I remember you telling me that his special person is your fiancé, right? Yuna nodded, pursing her lips. Does your grandmother know about this? In truth, the arranged marriage between Yuna and Michael was done away from her grandmother's permission. It was due to the two families, Michael and Yuna's parents, having a good relationship with each other that led to that arrangement. But once Yuna grew up and showed her extraordinary talents, Zir Montgomery began to treasure her like a diamond. Yuna's parents, thankfully, hadn't told Zir at that point. However, due to a certain event, one that pertained to when a company got obliterated off the face of the earth for proposing an arranged marriage for Yuna, Yuna's parents decided to annul their arrangement with Michael and his parents. It was a way for them to be protected from Zir's wrath. After all, she would eventually find out the truth sooner or later. And that was supposed to be it. But as fate would have it, Yuna eventually met up with her ex-fiancé. And developed special feelings for him. That was actually the main reason why she went back to the Montgomery estate in the first place. She wanted to settle things so that she and Michael could go on unbothered without having all of that baggage from the unsolved arranged marriage. If she advanced in her cultivation enough, even her grandmother won't be able to say anything about her decisions. Of course, she didn't say any of this to Michael because she didn't want him to know about it yet. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.